Welcome to a very special episode of Mormon Book Reviews. This is a very important conversation that you're about to watch, but we get really deep in the weeds. I, along with my two new co-hosts, Heidi and Jan, which are also two fantastic people that you're going to get to know in this episode as well, we interview Phontaine and Hannah Judd about their series that they recently released on YouTube called The Crazy Train. Well, we get so deep in the weeds in this conversation, I felt it was really important to put the trailer at the beginning so you can get an idea of the story that they have to tell. And it's amazing, and it's something I've never heard before, and you're going to be blown out of the water by this story. Both Latter-day Saints and ex-Mormons and just outsiders who are interested in the story that is the Restoration. This is a very unique and unusual story that needs to be get out there and be told. So we're gonna do the trailer for this series called The Crazy Train, and it's 24 episodes long. And I thought this 3-minute trailer kind of gives a good summation, and then that will lead right into the interview. So I hope you enjoy, and I look forward to hearing comments from you about the series as well as the interview. I hope you enjoy.
There's something to be said about living in constant fear.
All I ever wanted in life was to be a good dad, to give my kids a loving father.
I was constantly worried that my kids were going to be taken away from me. This is textbook grooming behavior. Why are you arresting my husband?
All of a sudden, I'm like, I was going to get stabbed.
The vindictiveness is not going to go away. So, yes, you will be targeted again.
If you're ever talking to a person in power and they later lie to you, there's nothing you can do about it.
This is perjury, only it's perjury from the police, which is way worse.
How much blood are you testifying was there in the car?
I saw handprints on the windows, on the doors, like they were trying. Someone was trying to claw out.
But I think he finally realized that I was innocent. I just think it was too late at that point.
The social conviction was the real punishment.
People treat you way differently. It's like you have some sort of incurable disease.
Don't come back! You come back, I'm calling the cops. I have had it with you two.
If my daughter took her own life, that would absolutely ruin us.
I had the distinct impression that there were wolves in the flock at church, and I could not shake it. That there were people at church who were going to hurt my children to punish me.
This is not justice.
I have been blackmailed and told, if you don't do what we want, we're going to accuse you of child abuse.
What was I supposed to do? I knew what the law was, but I didn't know if it was going to get followed. It was like a no-win situation. There was no right answer.
You cannot take my daughter from me!
I cannot believe the arrogance of the judges.
We would be the first people ever to be excommunicated for attending church.
She said she had bought a gun.
You also testified that you hit him, right?
She said, you know, Hannah, that could be perceived as sexual assault.
I tried to pull his hair, and I hit him in the back.
Gossip and rumors had now morphed into fact.
I'll write this up and basically get it to the chief.
We had already done everything in our power to try to resolve the issue quietly.
There were now officially no more options.
I was so freaking discouraged, just sitting, wondering what just happened and how.
Welcome to Mormon Book Reviews, where an evangelical encounters the Restoration. I'm your host, Steven Pynakker, and I'm joined by two special co-hosts that have just recently entered my life. I felt it was really important to have different voices on this program. I especially feel that female voices are really important in this as well. I want to welcome as my newest two co-hosts, and remember, I'm not replacing any of my other co-hosts. Don't let any rumors get out there. We are adding, we're not subtracting. My first is Jan Broberg. Welcome to the program. Of course, many of you might know her from the Netflix series and her recent Peacock series. You've had a remarkable story in life, and it was recommended to me by Beth Magnetic of the Mormon True Crime podcast to reach out and have you come on as a co-host. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here with you, Stephen, and our guests.
This is great. And then, of course, recently I had Heidi Love come on my program to talk about the interesting relationship between Howard Hughes and the Mormon Church. It's a fascinating story, and she was able to share that with our audience, my audience, a couple weeks ago. And she also has and by the way, Jan has a podcast called the Jan Broberg Show, which I guess you're going to be changing the name to. Is that correct?
Well,
Probably change the
you'll be
name.
able to find me that way too. So,
Okay. And
yeah, the
then
Jan Broberg Show.
And just real quick, Jen, while we're here, what kind of podcast is it and what kind of topics do you cover?
Well, because I'm a survivor of childhood sexual assault and rape and was kidnapped twice and brainwashed severely, my show concentrates on the survivors. And because almost every family is touched by someone, whether it's themselves who went through an abuse situation, it's 1 in 2 girls, 1 in 3 boys will go through some kind of sexual assault or harassment. They'll be victimized in one way or another. And most of the time it's by someone they know. And because that was the case with our story, by another, a man and his wife and 5 children who moved into our ward and our neighborhood, became our best friends. I was 9 when they moved in. I was 12 when he kidnapped me the first time. And he was literally his 3 oldest boys matched me and my 2 sisters in age, and we were all best of friends. And we did hundreds of activities with this family, including church activities. And so when it all happened in the story, I just knew coming out of it all and in my adult life, and knowing that I wanted to tell the story, because I often think that people believe that things like this happen by scary strangers. But Elizabeth Smart's story is a very, very small minority of stories like that happen. And so for people not to feel alone, I knew I wanted to tell my story. And that's what I do on the show. I tell other people's stories. And it's almost always someone that they know, someone in their church, someone in their family, someone in their school or community, some institution that is well known and loved by the family, usually because they're experts at grooming. And so I have survivors, and I also have their healing story. So there's an inspirational piece to it, but many become, therapists, write books, and we are there to, represent the 2 billion, with a B, survivors of childhood sexual assault and abuse that are on the planet. So that's what my show is about.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. And then Heidi, of course, I'm so glad to have you back on. And this is your first time co-hosting here on MBR. What is your podcast cover?
So I am Heidi Love of the Unfiltered Rise. I called it unfiltered because that's your warning. Ha. And rise because you can rise above your situation, right? And that's what it basically focuses on. But I also am pretty conspiratorial. I love to deep dive the connections and a lot of things people have forgotten in history. I think it's fun, like Howard Hughes and different silly stuff. Like, oh, it's not silly, but anyway, with the JFK papers coming out, we just did a big episode on Permindex, the RFK story, all of that stuff. Maryland, we're kind of into all of that and true crime as well. I just did a really big expose on Israel Keys. So, anyways, we do a little bit of everything over there. So it's fun.
So this is why I felt it was so important to bring you two on, because of these two individuals that are here and their remarkable story, their crazy story, which gave the name to your show, The Crazy Train. I want to welcome Phontaine and Hannah Judd to the program. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
I want to say I had a gentleman reach out to me on Facebook, and he asked, would you be interested in covering people that in the church that have issues on the ward level? And I said, well, I've had people come on and talk about issues they've had with their bishops and stake presidents in the past. I said, certainly would. And he said, and then he got me in touch with you two. And Phontaine, you and I had a series of phone calls, and I have watched quite a bit of your stuff. To both Jan and Heidi. They watched every single episode, and they both really were dedicated. And I really felt like this is important to have them on. And your story is just incredible. And I wanted to start this off with just kind of lay the groundwork here, Fontaine and Hannah. What is your show about, basically? Just kind of lay the groundwork. And what made you decide to tell your story the way that you did?
That's a really hard question to answer. I mean, there's 24 episodes,
Yes.
and we've actually had that question before. People are like, wow, why can't you just tell it in like 5 minutes? Well, there's a reason why there's 24 episodes, because there's so many details and just so many convoluted storylines. And I think the easiest way, and the reason why there's 24 episodes, just so you know, is because the devil's in the details. It's if we were to just tell what happened to us in like 15 minutes, you'd be like, yeah, right. There's no way. You wouldn't believe it because it's unbelievable. But to make a very long story short, we were living in LA. We were living the dream. I was a Hollywood editor, and we had some sort of weird sickness. We had to kind of pivot to a different career, and we ended up joining forces with a individual that we knew, and tried starting a business, and kind of again making that pivot that went all sorts of sideways. He turned out to be a scammer, took us for a lot of money, left us in the lurch. And when you're poor, we've discovered that that's where all the bad people come out. And it was weird, the amount of people that came out to try um, to hurt our family. My oldest daughter ended up getting sexually harassed at church. She ended up becoming suicidal. But instead of helping our family and helping my daughter, and this is actually the big turning point, is the bishop, Logan Shepherd, was like, you know what? Your daughter's crazy. You guys are crazy. We don't want you. And he started spreading all sorts of rumors and gossip, and it was just bizarre. And then so we took it to the stake president, and he backed the bishop, and we brought other these problems to them, and they refused to deal with them, was the issue, and we had no recourse. Well, then our neighbor ends up hiding our daughter from us for 2 weeks, and we finally find her, and we call the police and say, hey, please bring our daughter home. And the police refused. I mean, it kept getting stranger and stranger. And we're like, well, there's no way this can keep continuing. It can keep happening.
Telling us there was a new law in California that people could take other people's kids,
And there's nothing you can
as
do
they
about
went
it.
willingly, then that's fine.
And so then my son was like, well, this isn't okay. And so he went and set up a meeting with my daughter down at the local park. And it turned into a scuffle because the lady who had abducted my daughter, she had her friend, and they fought my son. And so there's this big kerfuffle at the park. My wife finds out about it, comes home, grabs me. I end up at the park. I extract my daughter from the situation. And to my complete surprise, the police arrest me and charge me with the crime. And the two ladies who had abducted my daughter and hid her from me for 2 weeks, nothing happens to them. We end up having to go to court. And then there's CPS involved. The police officer's like, I'm turning you into CPS. And so then I got a CPS record. And the CPS, they don't do any due diligence. They just say, oh yeah, you're guilty of child abuse. No evidence. No evidence whatsoever. And yet now I'm on the CPS index. We end up going to trial. We're like, okay, we're going to clear this all up. We had a lot of faith in the system, and that was a mistake. I ended up getting found guilty of simple assault against the women who had abducted my daughter. And if you know, simple assault, a lot of that term gets mixed up a lot. It doesn't mean that I hit or attacked anybody. Simple assault means you scared somebody. They were worried they were going to get hurt. And so I got convicted of scaring the women who had abducted my daughter. Anyway, and so and you're like, okay, well, that was a crazy story. Well, that's like the foundation for what happens next, because we end up leaving the congregation, trying to go to a different church congregation altogether, maybe get a fresh start. But instead, some lady in our new congregation takes a fancy to my son, who was dating her daughter at the time. And she decides, when my son's like, you know what, I'm going to serve a full-time mission. I'm not going to get as serious as this lady and her daughter wanted to be. So he calls it off. The lady gets mad. start spreading horrible rumors. She knew all about our past. And so she used those false accusations to make all new false accusations. And again, it's just, we were poor at the time, and the rumors and we just couldn't defend ourselves basically. And everyone's like, oh yeah, Judds must be crazy because I've heard all these other rumors. And we go to the bishop, our new bishop, and say, hey, help us resolve this. And not only does he refuse, but he threatens us. He's like, oh no, I know bad things about your family. You better drop this. We're like, what is going on? And so then we go take it to the stake president. And that's when it gets really weird. Not only does he refuse to help, he actively starts engaging in the persecution and threatening us. And he ultimately, he ends up calling CPS on our family to try to get my kids taken back because I refuse to just let. And you're like, well, why didn't you just let it go? Well, it's because it directly affected my son. He wasn't able to serve a mission because of these false rumors spread by this lady, Sandra Brown. And so we're scratching our heads. We go up the food chain though. We're like, okay, this can't continue. There's a food chain in the church. We go from the bishop to the stake president to the area representative to the regional authority, and we just go on up. And everything, and this is the weird part, everything keeps getting redirected to this guy named Mark Bragg, who I guess is kind of like the stopgap. And I understand that, the church has gatekeepers to, keep people away from the apostles and prophet. But in this situation, we thought it wasn't appropriate for our requests for resolution to be ignored, but that's what was going on. And so ultimately we're like, you know what? We can't get help. We've written to the apostles, we've written to the prophet. Everything gets redirected to this guy, Mark Bragg, and he's condoning Alan Smith, who is the stake president, calling CPS on us, harassing us, coercing us, threatening us, blackmailing us. And we're like, okay, so what recourse do we have? We're not about to jump into the legal system. That didn't work out real well. And so we ended up, we decided, okay, we got to tell our story. And so then we were involved in the creation of the Crazy Train. And that, we thought for sure that's how we would get the story out there and get a dialogue going and get these silly problems resolved, because daylight is the best disinfectant. Like, let's just tell what happened, and we'll be able to get the story out there. Oh, there it is.
So I just wanted to pull this up. So this is the Crazy Train, and they released these videos a few months ago. There's 24 of them. I just want to direct. So this is what they produce, and it's highly produced. It's an amazing story. So just want to direct people to that real quick. Heidi, it looks like you were wanting to jump in here. Did you have a question or a comment?
No, my asthma's acting.
Oh.
Sorry. But I will say this, your family is beautiful, and I can fully understand as on the poverty end of things before I did get out of the church, and as well with my story, like what happened to you guys, and it's not isolated, which is the worst part. And I think you really didn't have any other choice, to be honest. And as far as the legal system, I think they did what they did to you because they were terrified to be sued, to be honest. So, because you guys had a case. So, yeah, I wouldn't want to take it either, because like you've already been down that road, right? But it was totally unfair.
And that's actually the first thing my mom commented when she watched some of the videos. She says, "Why aren't they suing people?" So that's why didn't you sue anybody?
Well, the simple answer is we didn't have money. I mean, no, the first and foremost, that would be like, why didn't we sue Jerry Glass or the police?
Oh, yeah. That takes money.
Well,
we were
and
wiped
trust.
out just from the court case. No, we were wiped out from the court case, just defending ourselves against all these ridiculous claims. We were out almost 30 grand.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And that's just to lose in court. So, and we were talking about it. We're like, okay, well, let's just say, because we've discussed this, let's just say we were to sue somebody. First of all, we don't have the money. The people that we'd be suing, these are powerful people. These are people who have a lot of money, a lot of friends, a lot of connections. And first of all, I don't think we would get a fair trial. We have zero confidence in the legal system. But secondly, let's say we win. What does that do? Now there's a schism. Now we have more enemies. We've opened up the door for more people to be angry at us. And We just, and that's the best scenario. Let's say we lose. Now we're out all that money. Now we have to pay damages. And now things just got a lot worse. And we figured that that was the much more likely scenario anyway. Is like, there's no winner by trying to sue. But then, and the other real, I'll get to you in a second, Jan. The other real issue is that, the scriptures are abundantly clear. Christians don't sue other Christians. That, as far as so in my mind, there are two different things. There's the whole legal aspect of CPS and the police and all that, but then there's the other aspect of what's the Christian obligation. So,
Jen?
I do think I want to say that when you start down that road, it becomes a cycle, okay? And so that's what I saw in your story was a repeat of a cycle that got started, and there's almost never a way out. It's almost as if you have to be pulled out to then find a path that actually would be, it's very Christian to sue people that do things wrong to you. It is not non-Christian. I just want to make that very clear. When the wrong is done, the right thing is to make sure that it comes to the light of day, which you did in a different way by doing your story. Because it is my feeling that so often people do not tell their stories because they're afraid of those same things and because they don't have the funds. And what most people don't realize is how much it costs. And so when I do my show on sexual assault survivors, and so, I want to have your son and your daughter on my show with you both, if you want to come, because I believe that what happens is we think of something as being right or wrong, sexual abuse or assault or whatever, and it gets into a cycle, and nobody ever gets to the bottom of why did we not talk to both parties on each side, because they were all young people under the age of 18 that were involved in just this one little microcosm of your story, and you couldn't get anybody to believe either way because parents don't want to believe that their son or their daughter did anything wrong. You're also in Mormon culture where you've been taught, and your children have been taught their whole life, that your body is a temple and that you're going to wait until you get married, and that it's like the worst thing that could happen is for you to have sex. Well, what if your kids did? Would you have disowned them? Would they have been thrown out? I don't think so, at least not the parents that I saw in the 24 episodes that I watched. We don't get to the bottom of things. And that problem, when it's swept under the rug, no matter what it is almost never solved because of things like your poverty. So I'm just telling you that I agree with you. You have 12 children, but you had a successful career. You've worked your entire lives, and you worked very hard to be a good mother and a good father and to do all the things that you could. You got no support. How that cycle could be broken, I'm not sure, other than you telling your story, which is what you did. And you tell everybody's names, and you show pictures of all the people in your Crazy Train docu-series or whatever, however you want to call it, that's on YouTube. And so I wonder what kind of repercussions now, after telling the story and having so many layers of church leadership fail you and not believe you and not do anything about it and actually add to the problem. Where are you getting messages, death threats? What's happening now?
Well, I was
so before you say that, real quick, we actually have 15 children. Just want to clarify. We have
okay.
eight sons and 7 daughters. So,
Okay.
side note.
Yeah.
At that point, I guess it doesn't really matter.
Stop. Okay, so when I found out that you were going to be the co-host, I started watching some reviews of your original documentary, and the two of the reviews I watched, one of the people in particular, they were like, those parents, they were idiots.
Her parents?
Her parents, they were absolute idiots. How could they have done this to their child? And then I also watched an interview where you were being interviewed, and you were talking about your parents, and you're like, look, you don't understand. the situation where this man, he was trusted, he was our friend, he was in our community, in our church. People, the first time it happened, people had said to us, "You're not going to press charges against him, are you? He didn't do anything. He didn't hurt you." And there was this pressure of oh, you better not do, you better not do that, where it was almost like you were the problem. And anyways, as I was watching your interview and having seen other people say, "Oh, how could those parents be that stupid?" I felt like I understood, because I don't like reading reviews of our show, but we'll get that as well, where it's like people are like, "Oh, they were so naive. They were so stupid. How could they have gotten financially like into this mess or whatever?" And that was one of the problems with going back and trying to tell this story is I already know what happened, but I have to go, okay, here were all the clues, laid, and you lay out all the clues of, hey, yeah, so this was weird, this was weird, this was weird, this was weird, this was weird. Oh yeah, we got taken advantage of. And it makes it seem like, oh, well, duh, of course you did. And it's really easy to see that. And but what's interesting about our story compared to your story, and my husband was giving the summary, he skipped over some of these parts, was one of the reasons I guess I got disgraced or discredited was because I said the cell phone guy. It goes back to the cell phone guy and me going, wait, something's wrong here. This guy's handing out cell phones. I now know from basically an accident, I found out he's tracking these phones and he's lying about it. And he's doing this to other kids.
He's grooming people. He's grooming children and enticing them with a gift. And he's doing his classic grooming. He's building trust so that he can probably go sexually assault them, because that's pretty much what happens. And if any church ward thinks that there isn't a predator in their midst, there is. And if we don't get to the bottom of having people come forward and talk, and this is how we treat them when they come forward to say something's wrong here, and we treat them this way, people won't talk. And the problem is people don't talk. And that's why we're here. We are talking because we absolutely have to unearth exactly what is going on in front of our eyes so people will see it and believe it in the first place and then do something about it in the second place. And the problem is that doesn't happen because we don't think, oh, people that enter a place of trust with us and we go to church with these people, they must all be, they must believe and think like we do. And they show up that way. They look that way. Their family looks that way. He didn't have a scary, symbol on his forehead. Don't get to know me. He looked like the most service-oriented man that helped everybody, and everybody loved him. And he had a lot of charisma and charm. And I looked at several of those, and I think Mark Bragg was, when I lived in Los Angeles, I think he was one of my church leaders in one of my stakes. I don't know if he was in that area or not, but I know his name and I knew his face when I saw him, and I'm like, I
know him.
Yeah, I mean a little bit. I don't know him, but I look at that and I think you don't look at any of those faces and go, oh yeah, this person is this is a scary, they're not going to help me. They're going to hurt me, or they're going to hurt my kids. You just don't see them that way. So anyway, a question in there. This is very interesting because absolutely, I had wonderful parents. Just, the same thing. I know if we lined up your 15 children, they would say that. I'm positive. I mean, I'm assuming. I know that sometimes, kids are hard. They're hard to raise. They're hard. They don't all line up exactly like we want them to in Mormonism. They don't all just do everything the right way. And that's okay. I mean, they're children. But what was your Tia's, sorry, because this is my focus and my interest. When did Tia start to show these changes in personality that led you to understand like something was wrong? Because it looked to me like she really liked this guy in the ward as well, like they were friends. And was he grooming her, or was it
Um,
just sexual assault from the, I mean, were there other things that were left out of that story because she's young and I felt like there were gaps and I wanted to know more about what happened with her.
Yeah, so we tried very hard to be kind of minimalistic with Tia's story, just to protect pretty much everybody involved, especially, uh, I'll leave that there. But no, she was never friends with the Jacob Richards character.
not
Okay.
not close
No,
friends.
she
No.
was dating a boy from high school who looked similar, and that may be part of the confusion. But no,
Okay.
Yeah, he wasn't a member of the church, and she
Okay.
kind of at that point was like, I'm not a member anymore.
well,
I
having
don't like the
the way
church
we've been treated,
anymore.
yeah.
I don't like how my parents were treated. I don't like this is I'm gonna, and
Not
so
for
she had
me.
told her friends, I'm not Mormon anymore. And so then her friends were like, "Oh, you're not Mormon anymore. That means you can do this and do that, and all those
Mhm.
rules are gone." And so
Well, and
from
then that Jacob Richards guy, that's when he was like,
yeah,
oh,
so he found out and was like, "Oh, I will tell everyone what you've done. And I'm going to blast this out there. I'm going to tell people,
that you
you
have,
better do what
yeah,
I
that you
want."
have a non-Mormon boyfriend.
Where that was where she felt like, oh, I'm not going to ever recover from that. And I'm,
Yeah.
that for a teenager, that's like
Yeah.
overwhelming.
And so that was
Oh,
when we noticed
totally.
that
Yeah. Damaged
that was when,
goods,
to
especially
answer
one
your
with this
question,
background.
that
Yes.
was to answer your question, that was when we first noticed something was very wrong. We're
Yeah.
like, something has gone terribly wrong, and we didn't know
Mhm.
When
what actually had happened.
she started high school, she was a cute girl, a spunky, and she even like was like, I'm gonna go to school and I'm gonna be a good example and I'm gonna like, she was very upbeat, very excited. She's always been impulsive though. She's always that that was her MO from the time she was a toddler, a baby. She just loved testing the boundaries like so it's not surprising to me that she was testing the boundaries. That was but
Look at her. She's somebody that goes and fights and puts her stand up and
yeah.
protests like
She's
I
got
do.
No,
lots of records.
no, but she always kept me on my toes, always. And but also was very impulsive, and but there was definitely a change. And I
Mhm.
don't and part of the thing is I don't think I have the whole story of what went on.
Yeah.
I don't think I have the
Well, we
whole
just say
story for
what we
that.
saw,
Yeah,
what we
and
observed.
so
Yeah.
anyway,
Okay.
but
I just
back
wondered.
to yeah, but
Yeah.
back to uh the issue with the cell phone guy. It was just so weird. If I were to talk to anybody in this community around here and say, "Hey, I'm worried about this," they look at me cross-eyed. It wasn't until I talked to somebody who was outside of the situation that they were like, "Oh, that's bizarre. Why haven't you called the police yet?
Right.
Are
I
you
think
joking?
I
This
think
is
culturally,
weird
right?
behavior."
Yeah, because culturally we are taught to trust our leaders as Mormons. Culturally, people
Mhm.
comment on like your story and your story about like how could these parents do this, or how could they not know this, or how are they naive? Wait a minute. As a Mormon, you don't understand. This is a cultural problem here. As in a
Absolutely.
culture, yes, we are not trained the same way as the outside community. So of course, you're going to trust people in your ward. You're going to trust your friends that are in your circle. You're going to trust, and it's a different kind of trust. These people on the outside don't understand your story looking from the outside because they haven't lived Mormonism. in my opinion.
Yeah, and there's two things to that. One is like any other church congregation, we call each other brother and sister, and the bishop's the father of the ward, and uh, it very much has a feeling, a connection and a bond as a family, and and but my mom, when I was growing up, she was friends with a lady who was a detective, who would investigate like children getting molested and stuff like that. That was her job. And the time of year she was always the busiest was at Christmas and Thanksgiving. And the reason why is because people have their family together and you trust your family, and you wouldn't think, hey, my brother would do this to my kids, or my cousin would do this. This is my cousin. This is my cousin. And I know them. I grew up with them. They wouldn't do this to my kid. And so the time of year, and your guard is down. You're like, this is my family. I can relax. I don't have to be like watching my kids, and you and so that's actually puts the kids at risk, because that's actually when they're most vulnerable. And so similarly, when you're with your brothers and sisters at church, you kind of have that same feeling of trust, and your guard is down. But then the second problem, where you're saying, hey, it's specific to our church, is this idea, and that you obey your leaders, but also a false, misguided idea that you never criticize your leaders or say anything bad, even when they're doing bad things. And I think because I've been thinking about this a lot, because I was the one who raised my hand in church, and people just were like, you are a sinner. And there never was any question of, so why did you raise your hand? What's the concern? It was just like, oh, you raised your hand in church. You're going to hell. You're not temple worthy. You're a bad person. And the problem is one of the covenants that you make in the temple is no evil speaking of the Lord's anointed. But evil speaking of the Lord's anointed, if you look up what the definition of that is, it's saying things that are malicious, untrue, um, and making stuff up with the intent to hurt another person. That's not talking about, hey, my bishop is engaged in this criminal activity. Yes, you guys need to know this. This needs to stop. He's doing something dishonest, or he's hurting somebody. That's actually,
or he's covering for somebody who's hurting
covering for somebody. And so you are 100% right that that's a cultural thing, and that is actually not doctrinal. But people got up at the pulpit after I raised my hand. For months afterwards, people would get up and talk about how they sustained the leaders, and it was directed towards me.
When you raised your hand to say, I don't sustain this person.
Yeah, I don't sustain, because at that point I knew my bishop was threatening blackmail, and I knew he was lying about my son, that he was making stuff up, and I was being threatened, and I'm like, you can't do that as a bishop. We got a problem here, because if he's doing that to me, I don't know. He
could be doing it to many other people.
There's a chance he's doing it to other people. This doesn't fly. You can't be bishop and doing stuff like this.
Do you think you were persecuted because you were a woman and you raised your hand?
I don't think so. I don't think so. My husband was there too. We both raised our hands
together.
I don't think it had anything to do with my gender. I think it has to do with the fact that it's very much like, oh, you never are supposed to do that, which is not correct. John, the church recently came out with these manuals, teachings of the prophets, and John Taylor, I think, do you know which chapter that was?
Chapter 18.
Chapter 18 of the John Taylor manual. He explains that not only that, if you think that you have a leader who's doing something wrong, and you've approached him personally, and the matter isn't straightened out, you actually have an obligation to raise your hand. Uh, and the thing is we had done everything in our power to quietly, privately handle the problems, and we were going up the chain of authority, and that got cut off. The process that was supposed to happen got cut off, and it only left us with the option to make things public. And so, but back to the thing about people in the community not accepting when you report that something's wrong, but people out of the community going, "Oh yeah, this is wrong. This is not okay."
Yeah.
It's bizarre to me. We because I reported the cell phone thing, I was kind of put on this, okay, she's out to get this guy, the Eben Vischer guy. And instead of being suspicious of him, I was the one who became, okay, you're maybe not okay.
Yeah, this is the weirdest thing. It's this whole victim shaming thing. Like, how dare you be a victim?
Yeah.
Like,
so when I was primary president, and then I also said, hey, I'm worried about this little boy. I'm worried about him. And then later, I was only primary president for a short time, and it may have been that I was released because of that.
He was showing signs, just for the listeners to know, he was showing all the signs of having been abused.
Yes,
I mean,
he was, yeah.
He really was. I mean,
yeah,
as I'm watching the story, I'm like, yep, check. Yeah.
Yeah. And
no. But Jan, would you say though, Jan, the reason that you recognize that is because you'd gone through something similar and because of your background? Or do you think it would be like anybody who has been trained or has any sort of understanding of childhood development would be able to recognize that?
I think the problem is, going back to the heart of what you're explaining here and talking about, is that there's a naivety that is built into the culture of the church to not ask questions, to not be. I remember being on Good Morning America with Diane Sawyer, and she asked the questions, and you don't know what they're going to be. And the last question that she asked me, and I feel like it was like, I kind of got like a direct download from, God, like, say this, because I had never been asked this question. But she said, don't you feel that people who are religious, highly religious, are more susceptible to things like this happening, to being, molested, kidnapped, brainwashed, all these things? And I was like, I took me 1 second, and I said, when we teach our children to have faith in something, we should teach them to find facts. We should teach them to question it. When we teach any group of people, students in school, students in Sunday school, wherever we are, we must encourage free thinking, critical thinking, fact checking. We must encourage these kinds of things. I didn't have those words then when I was interviewed by her, but it was like this whole thing. Like, we teach people to be kind. We also should teach them to be cautious. Those were the things that I said, and that is missing in highly religious, maybe highly religious homes or communities where you live inside of a bubble. You don't know you have to do those things within your bubble, and you do.
Yeah,
I do feel like, yes, as we're getting smarter and we keep doing podcasts and we keep bringing our stories to the forefront, are people getting more educated? Or is more awareness happening? Yes. Should we know the developmental, things about a 6-year-old, that 5-year-old, 8-year-old? What we should know some things, so that when they start touching and exposing and they start doing things, that came from somewhere. That didn't just happen because their little brain is developing, and this is what I do now at age 6. That doesn't happen. Something's wrong.
Well,
but
and
I don't
also
know that people would know it.
In any church, not just Mormonism, but Mormonism is an especially close, like, brotherhood and sisterhood, like you were mentioning, and I know because I grew up in it like my whole life. And it's not a bad thing, but it could be any church. Okay. The Catholics have gone through, a lot of people have gone through
Oh
this
yeah.
where here's the thing. People that are predators are extremely attracted to falling into places like this because then they can look like you said he was like magnetic and really great and blah blah blah. Well, these predators are wise to that. So we do have to listen to people like you. If you're coming to somebody and saying, "Look, even if this kid had never been touched, even and I'm certain he probably had as a mental health nurse, like I'm saying, checking boxes, absolutely, but even if they didn't want to go there, they had an obligation to protect the other children. Period. Period. Whether they like that guy or not.
So basically, when I brought more than one issue
Yeah.
Right.
forward, saying, "Hey, I'm worried about this," and then I ended up calling. I ended up calling CPS, even though I really, have mixed feelings about that organization. I called CPS mixed feelings. And then they didn't do anything either. That was the bizarre thing, is they refused to go check on this kid either. It wasn't just my congregation or my bishop. Yes, my bishop should have. He definitely should have. But then CPS themselves, I don't understand it.
No, Bishop Shepherd,
They
not my bishop.
they would
You
not.
you
They
did
would
everything you
not.
could. Yeah, you did
Yeah,
all the
they wouldn't
things.
go check on this kid. Anyway, uh, so you're talking about how, we shouldn't trust, we shouldn't have this blanket trust in bishops and
Yeah.
and whatnot. And we were talking to a friend recently, and she's like, she was kind of relating to it, and she's like, yeah, I had on my mission, I had a stake president, and there was this huge scandal. And
Yeah.
you can look his name up on the internet because it was a big deal. And we go and we look up uh, this the story that she was telling us about, and all these websites pop up. And there's a website about where somebody had compiled a list of bishops and stake presidents who had commit serious crimes and had
Mhm.
gotten convicted. And when it pops up, we see a name there, and it's a unique name. And I was like, oh my goodness. And we look, and sure enough, it's from Sacramento, from the
Mhm.
area we live. And I did a little more digging, and it turned out this man got convicted back in 2021, put into prison. It was the man who was molesting that little boy.
Mhm.
And
They caught him. They caught
they
him.
caught him.
No, he was caught in the act. He was convicted of six victims, 12 counts, sent
And
to San Quentin for 8 years.
uh,
And
okay.
well, but the problem is that this happened in 2021. My wife made the report in 2015. That
Oh
means
yeah.
that this guy was going on
I get it.
molesting his victims
for
for
five,
six
more
more
years.
years.
Yes.
6 more years. And I was so upset when I realized this. And it was just a couple weeks ago. And I was like, okay, oh my goodness. Okay, this went on for 6 more years. And my mind's like, okay, did I do everything I could have to report? And I'm like, yes, I reported it to CPS themselves. I'm like, I did what I was supposed to do. Why didn't they listen to me? Why
Right.
didn't they listen to me? And then I was like, but then I started to like feel angry because I was like, wait a minute, I'm still getting crucified for this.
Right.
People are still saying, "Oh yeah, she's the crazy lady just making accusations against people," and and they're still doing that to me online and saying, "Hey, she's just accusing everyone of everything," and I'm like, "Wait, they know about this case.
Yeah.
They know about this case, and they're still throwing me under the bus." And saying, yeah, she caused problems back in our stake. She was throwing people like, She was just accusing people of all these things, and I'm like, these were actual concerns, yet you're still going to go
We're seeing
forward
it.
and say, hey, she just goes around causing problems.
Yeah.
Because I'm bringing something to attention, I am the one causing problems.
And when you're a victim of sexual assault, that's exactly how you feel. When you are the victim as an adult, somehow you carry this shame and this, I mean, I don't anymore, but you carry like something was your fault and nobody believes really, or they blame your parents. They don't blame the predator is the problem. So it's really interesting how this is what we're working to try and change, because if a person can't report, whether you're a rape victim or you're the mother that's the primary president that sees something, and if they can't be believed when they report so that some action is taken, that's why the cycle is so huge. That's why it's 1 in 2 women and 1 in 3 boys that will be sexually assaulted or exploited, experience incest, rape, or trafficking before the age of 21. It's a huge number and people can't wrap their head around it, but you did all the right things. You were let down by every system, social, like Child Protective Services, the police, and your church leaders. I mean, all along the way. So maybe it was so that you would be here today to tell this story and have all the things in it. That's what I felt like. My family feels like we had all the things in our one story. And because we told our story, I know there's been hundreds of thousands of people who've seen it and who have been emboldened to tell theirs. So I just commend you for telling your story and being honest and being and saying names, because you could be sued.
Yeah,
right?
It's true.
Yeah, it's just so crazy to me. I think, so much of the time in any church, not just the Mormon church, right? Or it could be an organization. It doesn't even matter.
Any institution.
Yeah, whatever. It's very like, let's protect each other. These people find each other because they can sense each other. Like, I swear it. And the predators like band together and protect each other. It's so disgusting. Yeah.
And I agree that all institutions are the one level. There's one more level to it, though, is that when you're making the claim that you're the one true church, it puts it at a higher level, a higher standard, that the members would have an expectation that because they're going to be protected because they belong to basically Jesus's true church. And so that creates that false sense of security as well. That's there. So, folks, we had some technical issues, but we are so happy to have Phontaine and Hannah back on. This kind of stuff happens in podcasts. And you were talking about, maybe just continue with what you were saying before you were cut off there, and we can put it together that way.
I would love to, except I don't remember what I was saying.
You were basically talking about how these were serious allegations, and that should have been the reason why, of course, they were taken seriously and not shoved back under the rug for this predator to continue for another 7 years before something happened, and having more victims, which is common with pedophiles and that are actively criminally, perpetrating on children. And so that really bothers me, because, if we're going to claim that the LDS Church is the only true church, then we should be held to a higher standard. And certainly shoving things under the rug is not a higher standard.
And that is 100% what I was trying to get at. But also, my wife had a really good point, and we've been talking about this. Again, she watched, Jan, some of your interviews, and one of the things that she noticed was that people who are close to the situation, people who know the people in the situation, it's almost like they turn a blind eye to evidence that would suggest any wrongdoing. But people outside the situation are like, you're an idiot for not recognizing it. And so it's this weird dynamic where the people who are in the situation and actually should be the ones taking the action are the ones that are actually giving a pass to these people doing bad things. And that was really what our experience was, is that none of the people in authority were ever held accountable for not doing their job.
Yeah.
And the reason why we call it the crazy train, and this is kind of where I was going, is the reason it's called the crazy train is not because our lives are wild and just it's nonstop nonsense. It's because it's a series of events. Each one leads to the next one and builds on the previous one, making the next one worse. So, from the John Huffman fiasco to Logan Shepard to our daughter to Jerry Glass abducting her to the police refusing to do anything about it to the judge, I don't know what he was doing, to then Sandra Brown and the new ward and spreading rumors to the bishop, again, refusing to deal with it, to the stake president covering for the bishop. It's like, if anybody along that chain of command, if just one person had stopped and went, time out, this is ridiculous, stop. Like, what if Stacy Patterson, the police officer, had said, Jerry Glass, you're under arrest. Tia, get back home, obey your parents, and go to counseling like you need to. Like, what if that had happened?
Right.
The whole situation would have been diffused, Or what if Bishop Holden said, hey, Sandra, Jared Brown, what are you guys doing? This is a good kid. Their family's been through an awful lot. You're just adding to it. Stop it. Grow up. Stop trying to hurt them. Say, you know what? I was angry. I came up with a rumor because I was angry. That was a mistake. Sorry. I won't do it again. Like, what if that had happened? But that's not what happened. And that was kind of our issue, is that none of these leaders are doing their job. And they're actually the ones responsible for allowing this to continue. And it's very frustrating and very, very troubling to me. And so, and I don't know how much Heidi and Jan, about what's happened since we've released the show, but I think, Heidi, you asked the question a little while ago, like, hey, what are the repercussions? What happened? Well, 2 weeks after releasing the documentary series, we had every expectation of getting some of these problems resolved. And instead, we had 2 armed men show up at our house with a letter. And they said, we represent the church, and you are hereby banned from ever coming to church. And we were like, I'm sorry, what? There was nothing, there was nothing legitimate about this letter or these 2 armed thugs showing up at my house. And we're like, no way. So we actually ended up going to church that Sunday, and the same armed men were there at church. And they had a whole bunch of people there. They slammed the door on us. They locked the door, and they had this letter, and they slapped the letter up against the window. Look at this. Look at this. You're banned from church. And we're like, what is going on?
Wait, let's go.
Oh.
Wow.
That's so Christ-like of them.
Well, that was, thank you. Well, okay, so if
you have all your children there with you too. It's just such trauma. It's terrible.
Going to church like normal. But once again, the rumors were that we had.
So in other words, it was not an illegitimate letter. It was real. You thought it was maybe somebody trying to threaten you, but it actually came from
We still weren't sure. We weren't sure.
Again, because if you remember right, Alan Smith had made fake letters in the past.
Yeah.
Pretending to be the prophet, pretending to be the general authority, pretending to be the brethren. So we're like, it's just another.
It seemed like
another Alan Smith
more
trick.
Of the same, because
right.
I've been a member my whole life. I've read the church handbook of instruction. If a person gets excommunicated, which is, okay, that's like the worst, right? Excommunication. You're still welcome to church.
Right. Absolutely. They're encouraged to go to church. Yeah.
And so getting this letter saying, oh, you're completely banned. And also you're not allowed talking to any missionaries. You're not allowed talking to church leaders. You're not allowed calling church headquarters. You're not allowed contacting the law firm that sent this letter. We're like, yeah, right.
So now do you know now that it was not sent by the law firm that represents the church?
Well, that's the thing.
You still don't know.
Still don't know. We still don't know. We called a lawyer And he called.
Laughed when he read it.
He read the letter. He's like, well, this is ridiculous. No actual legitimate law firm would send out a letter like this. It's so absurd. It really does seem like it was somebody trying to sound lawyerly to threaten you. And that's why they had to send the 2 armed men, because otherwise you would realize it was fake.
I mean, the letter even said delivered via certified mail. Well, it wasn't delivered via certified mail. It was handed us by these 2 guys. Like
they were holding weapons.
Oh yeah, they were armed. 100%.
It wasn't signed by anybody.
Armed.
It didn't say what we had done wrong.
You have to have a restraining order. That's a public building. I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
It's against the law. I know you can't do that. I know. I'm with you. I wouldn't do that either, because yeah, you were let down with them too. So I get that. But yeah, it's bizarre.
If anything, though, I think the reaction confirms everything that we said in the documentary. Instead of opening up a dialogue and saying, hey, you guys, we realized that we didn't have all the information. Now that we do, let's talk. We're sorry we didn't address the problems correctly. Wow, you guys have been wronged. And there's this long trail of clearly misbehavior and wrong
abuse of power. Let's just put it.
Sorry about that. Let's get this resolved. Instead, it's like, we're going to do more of the same. We're going to ban you from church. But it wasn't just from that ward building. It was all church buildings, all church properties worldwide for a minimum of a year. But the letter, and we posted it online. It doesn't say what we did wrong. It doesn't say, and we've never had like a church council or a membership council or any sort of reprimand or disfellowship. Nothing. It was just, 2 armed thugs show up at my house saying I can't come to church anymore. It was so bizarre. And so then
have you tried to go to another ward, or have you decided to leave the church? Are you going to what do you believe? There's certain things that I can't leave. That's why I still go to church, because there's certain things that I'm like, I believe that. And so I'm curious where you both stand. What do you do now? Have you tried to go to Temple Square or somewhere, and has anybody bothered you? I mean, I'm not that you can just do that if you don't have the money to go, but I'm wondering, what are you doing now?
Right now we're going to Presbyterian churches, and we're visiting other congregations, other religions, because our kids oddly are not banned. It's just me and my wife, which strikes me as really odd. And there's a whole bunch more to this, and we're still getting more information. We're actively living this part of the story, so we don't know exactly what's going on. But our kids were not banned, which also strikes me as odd, because so we're going to split up families in the church. Like parents can't come, but kids can. So that seems kind of odd to me. Everything about the letter strikes me as very odd. The fact that, like my wife was saying, we're not allowed asking the church, hey, what's going on? We're not allowed talking to any church leaders. We're not even allowed talking to the law firm that sent the letter. And so we showed it to our lawyer, and he's like, this is bogus. We ended up going to church, and even if it's legit or not, it doesn't matter. They have every intention on enforcing it. And so we thought that was odd. So
on the local level, on your local church level.
So yeah,
they tried having us
arrested.
A guy came out of the building and was like, "Hey, you're getting arrested. You're not wanted here. You're getting arrested for trespassing because you showed up today. Your law enforcement is on the way, and you're going to get arrested because you came to church today." And
well, and here's the thing. Here's a church that's drowning in people leaving, and they're treating people. And even if it's just you two and not your children, what example does that set for your kids? They're not going to grow up and be like, yay, I want to go back to that church. Right.
My 4-year-old, 2 days ago, I found a little thing of a temple. It was like a Christmas ornament of a temple, and she was playing with it. And I overheard her, and she goes, this is a nice church. they're not going to arrest my mom and dad.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
No.
Oh.
You're a story about my 6-year-old.
Oh yeah, after this happened, my 6-year-old son, he just kept coming up to me and like tears welling up in his eyes, and he's like, Mom and Dad, please don't go back to that church. I don't want you to go to jail. I don't want you, you're not going to go back to that. And he kept checking with me all through the week. You're not going to go back there, are you? You're not
The
gonna...
fear. They've been traumatized. Your children have literally been
trauma.
traumatized.
They have. And I said to my son, I said, listen, there are some people doing things they shouldn't be doing. And Dad and I are gonna get this straightened out. Because as we've looked into this, I don't know who authorized this. I don't know what's going on, but I'm worried this is happening to other people as well. And if that's the case, it needs to stop. Okay. And if you watch the most recent General Conference, they talk about how the gospel and the church, they're two different things. Okay. The gospel is perfect. It is the word of God. It is the truth. It is perfect. Okay. The church is the vehicle that basically implements the gospel. So it's kind of similar. Similar to like the Constitution in our country versus the government that is supposed to be implementing the Constitution. Constitution, awesome, great, true principles. Our government and our politicians, there are problems there, and you can expect, you can count on problems. And so it's the same with the church. Is I know that the gospel is true. I know that this is Jesus's church, but I like our government. I anticipate and know that there are going to be problems or things where, you know what, that's it, like in the government, you know what, you just passed that law, it's against the Constitution. It's against the Constitution, it's not right. So so when I see things like this happening in the church and I see that, oh, that directly contradicts what's in the scriptures, what Jesus taught, this needs to be fixed. This needs to, we need to straighten this out. It's similar to how if there's a crooked politician or laws that are unfair or wrong, I don't just leave the country and go, oh, forget this whole America thing. I go, hey, we need to get this fixed. We need to get this changed. And it's the same with the church. When people, you know, for whatever reason, whether they're misguided, whether they have ill intentions, start doing things with the church that are wrong, you got to get it addressed. You got to get it fixed. It doesn't mean that the gospel is not true. And so
what you said, I think, is 100% correct, Larry. Even in our own scripture, we've learned by sad experience, it's the nature and disposition of almost all men. As soon as they get a little bit of authority, as they suppose, they immediately begin to exercise unrighteous dominion.
Yep, well, 121. Yep.
But if we believe that, though, that it's the nature and disposition of almost all men, then why aren't there more checks and balances in place? Like, are we just giving lip service? Like, oh yeah, church leaders aren't perfect, but they're not held accountable. I have an issue with that. And right now,
me too.
The system that is set up, I think, has failed our family, and that bothers me. But it doesn't mean that I think that the church is bad. I actually, like my wife said, I believe this is the Church of Jesus Christ. I believe that he's at the head. I believe that this is a wonderful organization. I believe that it does incredible good. I'm very, very concerned about how our family has been treated, and the fact that, in all likelihood, this is happening to a lot of other people who don't have the ability to speak up or to speak out, but rather are just silenced. And the reason I say that is because those people have reached out to us and they're like, yeah, something similar happened to me, but I just left because I can't, what do I do? My wife and I feel like we were in a unique situation where not only can we tell what happened, but maybe we can give a voice to those who can't.
Absolutely.
I think that's really important. And actually, I think we even before we started taping, it's like, this is for the people who don't have the platform to let them know that you're not alone, that many people have been going through a similar thing. Jan, I know that you need to hop off here shortly. Was there anything you wanted to follow up on before we
Well,
let
I
you?
wanted to talk about Colton too. Well, but you've kind of gone over that, and he didn't get to go on his mission, right? That never changed.
Well, you mean Caleb?
Caleb, sorry, I said Colton. I meant Caleb. I can't read without my glasses on. I wrote down a couple different things, and then I take my glasses off and I can't see. I see it's a C.
Yeah,
Yes,
to your
Caleb.
point, we've got two of our kids still want to serve full-time missions. We have four kids who all want to get baptized. My wife and I wouldn't mind going back to the temple, but really we just like to go back to church. Like that was the whole point.
Yeah.
Documentary series is to get these things cleared up, and instead these individuals clearly never had pure intentions to begin with. And so this is very troubling to me that we've kind of unearthed a broader issue.
Is there any way that you can take the attorney that you have and get him to do some pro bono work to try and get to try and supersede past this so that it goes clear to up to the very top of things so that it can be actually dealt with? Because I know that, I mean, there's a lot, it's a worldwide church. You have human beings running it. They are unpaid. They are not trained. They are not taught. They are not told, how to counsel, how to give advice, and they're just human beings. And some of them are corrupt, and some of them molest children, and some of them, there's all sorts of things that human beings who are part of a volunteer clergy, basically, that are called, and for a short period of time they have this job in the church, and then they are released and somebody else takes that job. It's got lots of flaws and imperfections built into the organization just by that alone. What would you like to see happen? Just because I have to leave now, but what would you want to see happen in the next year as this crazy train story goes more and more, more and more people are going to watch it. More and more people will probably leave the church because of it. And it is, attrition in the church is huge right now. And I think it's because of a lot of problems like this and just digging their heels in and not taking responsibility. I have lots of sexually abused humans it was a Sunday school teacher. It wasn't necessarily at the top, but they've left the church because of those things. I have a lot of people on my show that talk about other religious organizations they belong to and how they left because they couldn't get anywhere, because these institutions, religious institutions, are airtight. They need to be held accountable for not changing policies and rules and regulations so that we can protect people. And when somebody in authority in your ward on a local level is doing something wrong, it needs to not only come out, but something has to happen. They have to be removed from their position of authority. And if it's a crime, they have to be taken through the legal system. If it's a crime against a child, it's being molested, they got to be taken through the legal system. It's not call the church office building and we'll get you to our legal team. We'll have them call you back. No, you call the police. And you guys tried to do all those things. So what would you like to see happen in the next year with this story going forward? Where would you like to be a year from now?
So we've been asked that question. So we actually did a website. It's stopthecrazytrain.org, where we kind of outlined the changes. I mean, it's funny that we've only talked about primarily the church, but we outlined the changes we'd want to see with CPS, changes we'd like to see with the legal system, and then the changes we'd like to see in the church. And there are quite a few things. Number one, I think it's more transparency. There needs to be more transparency. For example, as you remember in the show, we were asking our church leaders, hey, what's on these records? You transferred our records. It was against church policy. What did you say about us? And they're like, oh, we're not going to talk about that. We're not going to tell you what we wrote. We're like, so I can't see what's on what you've been saying about me on my church record, what annotations you've made. That's problematic. My wife recently, because you can go over your police record, you can go over your public record, you can go over your medical records and correct any problems, right? My wife a few years ago, she was going over her medical record. It said she was a smoker and she did marijuana. And we're like, Nope, never have. And so we were able to get that fixed, but it was affecting our insurance and causing, giving the doctors incorrect information. She read over it, saw that there were flaws in the record, we're able to get them fixed. Why can't I do that with my church record? There's a problem there. And the response I get is, oh, well, it's confidential. It's my information.
Right.
I should be able to see what's being said about me, because right now, for a fact, 100%, what's being said about me is not true. But these upper leaders are making decisions based off of the things that Alan Smith and Ned Telford and these other less than scrupulous individuals wrote about me and my wife. For example, that my wife is just trying to take down innocent men and that we're just troublemakers. And it's like, no, she wasn't trying to take down innocent men. Both of them were creeps and doing bad stuff. And one of them got convicted and is in prison. And so clearly the record, the church records are not accurate, and I need to be able to fix that. But we do have Jan, we do have a lot of, but we're not trying to steady the arc. We're not trying to fix the church, but there are some things I think that need to change. And that's one of them, is there needs to be more transparency. I think the bigger issue, and this is what both Jan and Heidi, you guys have both talked about, is this culture of trust. I think trust needs to be earned. This whole idea that by virtue of my calling, as bishop, you have to trust me, and I am a trustworthy individual, that bothers me a lot. Because as you said, Jan, that these people aren't getting trained. One person outside of the church commented to us, they're like, sounds like your church has an HR problem. You got a training problem. And I'm like, yeah, there's a mid-level management issue where you guys got to get some better training in there. You got these guys, and the world has become very complex. The world has become kind of crazy. And for these bishops and these stake presidents to be given these callings and have no background other than, oh yeah, I'm an accountant, or oh yeah, I'm an orthodontist, that doesn't help you or prepare you for the sheer volume of problems, whether you've got infidelity with spouses or children being abused or sexual assault of teens. Like, we need a little more training and a little more accountability. Jan, quite frankly, I think as soon as our bishop, Logan Shepherd, broke confidentiality, he should have been released. I think that would have sent a strong message. Don't do that. Instead, there was this circle the wagons mentality of the leaders protect the leaders. And I think that's really, that does not help anything.
And it's an interesting thing, and I, to your point and to what you're saying, it's really important what you're saying right now, because like you said, it's not just in this institution of this worldwide church, it's also in the institutions of how police interface and how they're held accountable for their interfacing with the problem, and then the social services and child protective services, and it goes on and on and on. And so when you look at a system that is a close-knit system, like a family system, and you realize how many people are protecting a predator in their own family, you see the same thing, and it is trickling either down from the institutional level or from the family level out, like we started with brothers and sisters. And that is the feeling of the church, and you can trust people because they believe the same things I do, and it is a close-knit, all of our activities cycle in and out of the church. I mean, that's pretty much all we did growing up is church. But I had a wonderful church organization bishop who, when I finally was telling my story at 16 and thought I had done something wrong, practically crawled over the table to grab me and hug me and say, no, you don't have to confess of anything. No, you didn't do anything wrong. Where I'm talking about this man who's been raping me for 4 years. He did the right thing, but now as an adult, having gone through what I've gone through, would I ever let my child go into a closed door with a bishop? Never.
Okay, thank you.
That would never happen because of what I know.
We've had the exact same conversation where, like, we will never, and it's sad, but we will never, ever, ever do a one-on-one with a bishop or let our children do that, or any ecclesiastical leader for that matter. It just it doesn't happen. And that's very upsetting to me, because that's not how it used to be. But
No.
has
And
been
there's many trustworthy bishops and people in different positions of authority and wonderful hearted people that are, doing Relief Society and whatever. I just have a lot of things that because of your experiences, you're going to now see things differently, as do I. And I think that that's where you make your voice heard. This is a change I want to see happen. I don't want that to be okay. Not because everybody is not trustworthy, but because too many take advantage. I don't want any business interactions happening within, there's just certain things that I think you have to be specific about as you're telling your story and going, this needs to change, and it has to be specified, and then you can get in there and maybe do something about it. That's why I think I've stayed in the churches, because I feel like I can make some change from within, but I'm very vocal. And so far, nobody's come and excommunicated me, because I think, I have many more stories than just my kidnapping story, and I am very specific about things that I will and will not tolerate. But I want you to be able to go to another ward and be able to have your gospel, however you see it, or go to a Presbyterian church. That sounds wonderful too. Doesn't matter to me. I think it's great. And be able to have the connection to, Christ and to the bigger picture, because I think my son totally lost his faith. He's totally out of the church, and that's fine too. But when he doesn't have a compass at all, that's a problem. There are things about having a bigger picture that I think are so important. And I just want to commend you. I'm sorry I have to leave this conversation right now, but I just want to let you know that I would be happy to talk more with you at any time. And thank you so much, Steven, for having me as a co-host. And Heidi, I just love getting to know you. I can't wait to do shows together again and just keep going. And I hope that somebody listening out there will find a way to give some pro bono legal time to this couple and family, so that we can get to the bottom of actually what needs to happen at the top level of this institution, instead of in the weeds out here in the local level with so many imperfect and corrupt people.
Jan of the Jan Broberg show. We want to thank you so much for hopping on today. Phontaine, was there anything you wanted to say to her before she hops off?
You're awesome. Thank you. I've really enjoyed our conversation. And yes, let's talk more. I would very much, again, I have a million questions for you.
Okay, let's do it. We'll get it scheduled. I'm going to need contact information from everybody because I don't
I'll
have
get it all
all of
to you.
it. So.
This is great. Well, thanks,
Okay.
Jan.
Great.
So,
Thanks so much.
this is great.
So
Heidi,
I am so curious. Yeah, I am so curious about a few things. And I did want to say one thing about your family and Tia and all the problems that happened with that situation. I think that in this day and age, parents, that if somebody points at you and says, if it's a child, okay, 12, 13, 14, right in the years that you don't want them rebelling against you, you're a bad mom because I didn't get my way. Now everybody goes, yep, you're a bad mom. Yep, you did that thing. Yep, you're bad people. And I know because I've lived it, right? And then the bad part is, as the parents, right, you're trying to just parent, literally. You weren't hitting her. Like, I watched the video and you were like, okay, I don't give you permission to leave. You weren't like, get your butt back here. You were very calm. You were like, okay, but I'm saying no. And you were very nice. And she still left and stuff, and all the things happened and circled around it. But I feel like the church and possibly congregation and the government saw this as like bad parents, bad you. Do you feel that?
Yeah, people like to, I feel like with parents, they like to classify you as either you're a good parent or you're a bad parent. And people like to throw those labels around. And quite frankly, there are no perfect parents. That does not exist. And so a lot of times as a parent, I think you get, well, no, I know you get thrown into situations where you're like, I'm not prepared for this. And I've never dealt with this situation before or this personality before. What do I do? And so you're scrambling and trying to figure out what the right thing to do is. And so, yeah, people can become very, very critical of, where you're like, well, at that time, I thought that maybe this would help or that would help. And well, maybe that wasn't the right thing to say or do. Maybe that would have been better. But
one of the criticisms, though, that we've seen, I believe it was on Reddit, someone was criticizing the show, and they said that it's so red flaggy because my wife and I come across as perfect. And I remember thinking, did we watch the same show? Like, we exposed all of these flaws, all these horrible decisions we made. Granted, we were doing our best with the information we had, but we exposed like bad thing happened, like from the business partner, embarrassing, and then our daughter running away, and then the whole thing with the police, and me getting arrested, and me being in jail. Like, yeah, that's
portray themselves as perfect.
That's your typical conversation starter of, hey, so let me tell you about my trip to jail. I don't understand that. Like, where do these people come from? So, if only perfect people were allowed to have children, the race would die off.
Right. Definitely. Well, I think in this society, they've really, at least for me, in my experience with my estrangement with my daughter, all of a sudden, there's this really big thing like those people are toxic. Never talk to them again. Don't go to therapy. Don't work it out. Just cut everyone off and move on. And it's weird. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. The problem I have with that is typically the ones that are filling the children's heads with that nonsense are the very ones who are planning on taking it. Again, as you saw in the documentary series, we did a whole expose on grooming, the textbook grooming behaviors. And one of them is saying, hey, your parents are toxic. Your parents are abusive. And it wasn't until our daughter got involved with Jerry Glass that all of a sudden she started spouting that nonsense of, oh, you guys are abusive. We're not abusive parents.
Because you looked at her social media. This was the main crux of the matter, like good parents, right? I mean, I'm sorry. That's something you probably should do, right? Your parents, teenagers. Yeah.
The ones that are promoting these ideas that the no contact and parents are toxic and your parents aren't perfect and blah, 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 are the ones trying to take advantage of kids. And it makes me sick. But again, what do you do, right?
Yeah, that's the situation that we're all in. I feel like it's like a different time frame back when I was young, and I'm probably older. I don't know how old you guys are, but I'm going to be 49 this year. So when I was younger, it was always like, do as I say, not as I do. Like, you're going to mind, sit down and be quiet, like all these things, right? We have this like stigma of parenting, and that's it nowadays. If my dad were alive and said to me these things, he would be toxic, right? He would be a bad guy. So, and then you see the society. Were they right to make everybody a bad guy? I don't know if this is working out. Like, I'm just saying, like everybody now is like victimized at some level, like immediately, right? If you parent them and tell them, you made the point in your video. If my toddler runs out into the street and I get them so they don't die, right? And I take them against their will to the curb, safe to safety, I am now withholding them. This is like it could be construed as you're making some harm against your child, right?
Yeah. I interfered on their free will.
It's just bananas. No, and how come that lady never got charged? She was clearly hitting you. I don't know what was going on, but in that video that she didn't get some charge because she was coming after a pregnant lady. That's crazy to me.
Again, the whole, there's a reason why it's called the crazy. It doesn't make any sense. Any reasonable person would watch this and go, what is going on?
It was just, you were very pregnant then. You were like extremely pregnant and she's coming after you. it wasn't like she didn't know, right?
Yeah, very crazy.
Yeah, I'm like, what?
Yeah.
But I was the bad guy in that situation.
Yeah. I don't understand fully. I think that at play there were multiple things in this situation, and one thing with the church, and it's not just the church, and it could have bled into your case with the courts, and I'm just speculating, this is full speculation, is they got rid of the secret society rule that you used to have to answer in to go to the temple. You cannot be in a secret society. You cannot be a Freemason. You cannot be in Skull and Bones. You cannot be in all these things. But now it's gone. And a lot of judges are Freemasons, a lot of lawyers are Freemasons, and a lot of Mormons are Freemasons. And you may have just been in the wrong place at the fully wrong time. And they might have, I'm just saying, like, it was too odd. They came for you. Like, it was not okay. It was really weird. Yeah.
Like, what do you mean?
Like they came after him for not the judge seemed to have a personal vendetta for you, like a personal.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Like
we still don't, the thing is, we still don't know. And again, part of the documentary series we were hoping is there'd be some investigation. Someone would watch this and go, well, that's not right. Or someone would watch,
wasn't right.
and
Yeah.
look into it and say, why did Judge Geverser make those rulings? Those are very strange. Or, why didn't the police follow basic protocol? Why didn't Stacey Patterson? Why didn't Taylor Magazine? Or why didn't David Condon? Why didn't they follow basic procedure? But then when we brought it up, why weren't they held accountable for making the wrong decision? Like we said it over and over again. We had video. They dismissed witnesses. Like all of that.
Yeah, that was your neighbor, sending your neighbor away. He was right there.
Oh,
He was
right
there.
My neighbor who was there for the whole thing. You watch the video. It's just, I don't know.
Wow.
Funny too, because at the time I remember we were just blown away. It was such a whirlwind of nonsense, and we felt like we were in the middle of it because we'd just come from, okay, we got sick in LA. That in and of itself was upsetting. Trying to start a career, that's challenging. Realizing that John Huffman was a fraud and that he was defrauding a whole bunch of people, and then he was being abusive to his wife, and that whole thing, like that kind of took the rug out from under us. But then being extremely poor, we were panicking. And so then for the whole thing with the neighbor to come along, it was just like, there's no way this can keep going. And yet
man. Yeah, I understand that. I think for like, I understand why you didn't sue anybody, because I'm sure your faith in the system at this point is just destroyed in general. And also the Christian aspect, right? Like of it. But like you're trying to be fair, but also not be in more trouble. Like, I mean, honestly, every time I watched a new episode, I'm like, and it's gonna get fixed, right? And then I was like, oh my gosh, this guy.
Expecting is at some point, at some point, normalcy will set in. At some point, it has to, right?
And that's what I kept thinking. Yeah, I was like, oh, and this is going to be the happy ending day. Yeah. Oh. Huh.
but then we released, and we're like, okay, now that, because a lot of this was based off of misinformation or false information or rumors or gossip. So we're like, okay, now that we present all the information, and here's the video of the altercation at the park, here's the bishop lying, here's what actually happened with my son and his girlfriend. Like, here it is. Here's all the information. No one can claim they didn't know, right? Mm-hmm. Right. We thought, now it's going to get resolved. And instead, it just got way worse. And
That's
we're like,
so weird.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, the Danites come to your door. I mean, and in the meanwhile, right? Like, you're just trying to take your kids to church to raise these little kids. And here you are still holding on to the gospel. And like, here's my thing. Just because I left the church, I'm not one of these people that are like, now you do that too, because that's best for you. Like, that's best for me. That has nothing to do with your life. And here's my thing. You really believe in it. And I can see that you do. And I can see that you want this for your family. And you are trying to do the right thing. Like, even if they didn't want you at that church, right? Like, okay, fine. Like, go to any other church, just like, it's too much drama here, whatever. Okay. But to say you can't go anywhere, and this is something you believe in, the people, I can't like say this enough. And I say this on my podcast a lot, because all my family's Mormon settlers. Okay. I am a Mormon line person, like literally. And I always say, it's not the people. They don't even know most of this stuff. Like the top hierarchy of whoever's running this show, where it's gotten offline, like what you're saying, like there needs to be some pulling back on the reins. Like, I think people have moved in, and it's a lot about money. It's like LDS Inc. on the top, not LDS God, like church, right? Like Joseph Smith, here we are, we believe in this. No, it's turned into a corporation, and they handled it that way by sending you that letter.
Okay, that is absolutely something I have become very, very concerned about as the church has grown, as it's become financially
Powerhouse.
a powerhouse. I feel like I don't feel like it. It seems like now you have this law firm that's calling the shots when normally that would have been
Armed guards. What on earth?
what is going on. I was thinking about it this week where a lot of what we're experiencing, these things happened in the scriptures. A lot of similar situations. And I was telling my kids this week, I'm like, yeah, so Jesus, he went to the temple and it was obvious they were turning the whole church thing into a business, a corporation. And he went and made a whip and he cleared out the temple.
Right. Yeah. He wasn't nice. He threw tables.
Yeah. No, we're not doing this with my father's house and the gospel. We're not turning it into a corporation. And he had to clear the temple twice in his short mortal ministry. He did that twice. And quite frankly, there needs to be a little bit of temple clearing.
You guys are flipping some tables. Good job.
And to just become a corporation. But also, one of the things that's really bothered me as I've kind of like taken in what's happened is here in America, we have this concept of separation of church and state. And back in Europe, you had churches punishing people. Oh, you didn't pay your tithing. We're throwing you in jail. Oh, you said this. We didn't like you. You're going to get executed. And they were using the government and the law to punish people for things they didn't like in the church. And in the experiences we've been having, I'm like, I feel like that boundary of separation has been violated because, whoa, you're not going to do what we like? Huh, we'll have CPS punish you. You can't come to church and we're going to threaten to have you arrested and thrown into jail. And I'm like, wait a minute. This is specifically, if you read the Doctrine and Covenants, this is specifically against our beliefs and our religion to be doing this sort of thing. And, but it also,
what about your constitutional right of freedom to religion?
Constitutional rights. I'm like, okay, so there's that aspect where I'm like, you can't start using the government to punish me because I'm, in the church.
Because I'm revealing misconduct that you're engaging in.
Yeah. So there's that problem, and then there's the problem of you bring a problem to your ecclesiastical leaders, and instead of it being prayed about or dealt with within the framework of the church, they're referring it to church legal. And I'm like,
no, you didn't even get a counsel. That is not normal.
Start running the church.
Oh, don't I say that in the show? Like lawyers are running the Church of God?
Yes. Well, because it has, when they changed the law about the secret societies and that you can now say, yes, I am an active Freemason or an active Skull and Bones member, like the prophet of the church is right now. Okay. These people now have incorporated it, whether or not they meant to 100%. I feel they did, but they are perverting, whether I believe in it or not, they are perverting something that means a whole lot to a lot of people like you, like your kids. Right?
I actually don't know anything about Skull and Bones or
it's okay. Yeah.
I'm actually not familiar with any of that. And the question, or kind of where I'm at right now, is we have Mark Bragg, we have Curtin McConkie, and we have these threat letters of saying, hey, you can't talk to anybody, you can't ask for help from upper church leadership, or you're going to get arrested. And any communication I try to put through, or anybody else that wants to help me put through, it gets cut off, and it does not go to the intended recipients.
Do you think this would have happened if you were wealthy?
Let me address that real quick. I think the entire series could have been called "What It's Like to Be Poor," because none of this would have happened.
You get treated differently.
Yeah.
John Huffman wouldn't have happened. Logan Shepard wouldn't have happened. Jerry Glass wouldn't have happened. The police wouldn't have happened. Sandra Brown wouldn't have happened. Like none of this would happen if we were wealthy. So
because they knew you weren't an asset anymore because your tithing was decreased. You're therefore then also, needing help from the church, which I have been there. That's a very, okay, I had cancer and I had to go to my bishop and ask for the same types of things. Okay. And I know other people that have gone to their bishops and they are now picking and choosing who they help. It's weird. I've never seen this before. Never.
It's not supposed to.
It's not supposed to. And
yeah.
A lot of the situations, Elder Bednar gave a fabulous talk in this last general conference, and it was about how the Book of Mormon was written for our day, how it was abridged, the stories, the prophet Mormon had seen a vision of our day. And so the stories from their history and from their teachings that he included in the Book of Mormon were specifically for our time period and our day to help us. And so his talk was, hey, as you're reading the Book of Mormon, think, okay, why was this put in here? And he specifically said, hey, reread the Book of Helaman. And I want you to think about why that was put in there for our day. And anyway, as I've read the scriptures, I've seen you have the story of the Zoramites, where the prophet went out there and he found in that area of the land, they had turned church into this thing where basically they were casting out the undesirables.
Yeah.
People with the problems, people who were poor, people maybe who had mental illness. They were out. They were kicked out. And they had gone to the prophet and said, hey, what are we supposed to do? We're not even allowed into church. We've been banned from church. And where he had that wonderful talk with them. And he's like, hey, that doesn't mean you can't have a relationship with God. That is not dependent on your, being able to go into your synagogue. That doesn't depend on that. But there are other situations in the Book of Helaman, for example, where there's the situation where you had the church and the wealthier members of the church started persecuting the poorer members of the church. Because of the pride and sin that started.
No, I love this part.
It said the church, and then it corrected itself, and it said those who professed to be members of the church. And so these situations that we're dealing with, these aren't unique. These aren't new. This has happened in the past within the church. And it doesn't mean that the gospel is not true.
Right. Because in the Bible, it says
that we should go, oh, this is okay. This is okay. No, it's not okay. And it's not pleasing to God when things like this happen, and it does need to be corrected. But my thing is, because of the way the letter was written that we received from Kurt McConkie, how it strictly said, hey, you're not allowed talking to any leaders or anyone in upper authority, and how our communication.
There's a gatekeeper. Yeah.
Apostles and stuff, it's been cut off. I do not believe that they would be okay.
With how you're being treated, yeah.
That is going on with Kurt McConkie banning people from church. I do not for 1 minute believe that Elder Eyring or President Eyring would be okay with this. Or be like, yeah, that sounds like a good thing. I don't. I've gotten letters from. I have a letter from President Nelson. I have a letter from President Eyring, a personal letter from President Eyring, and I've talked on the phone for 20 minutes with President Oaks. I know their character. They understand the scriptures. They are kind. They are righteous men. I know this. I don't just go, oh yeah, I hope they are. No, I actually know they are. I know they're good men. And I know if they knew what was going on, they would put a stop to it. And
I would hope. I would really hope and pray that they would come to the aid of you guys trying to live, whether like I said, it doesn't matter what church or anything, but to the congregation of their followers, that they say, come unto me constantly, to their congregation, right? And you are trying. You have done something in the Bible that the Bible says what? Become the church. Not go to church, become the church. And that is what you've now been forced to do. Because what else can you do? What can you do, really, at this point?
But here's the weird thing. On advice from our lawyer, after the whole, we get the letter from these two armed guys that come to our house. We're like, this is ridiculous. We go to church, and they're the same guys, are they're armed men, or they're banning us from church. It's so bizarre.
So weird.
We talked to our lawyer, and he's like, just call Curtin McConkie. There's no way this letter is legitimate. So we do. We call Curtin McConkie, and to our complete surprise, the secretary, we were like, hey, we got this letter. We think it's fraudulent. Our stake president, he's done this sort of thing in the past. We think this letter is fraudulent. And she goes, oh, is it a letter banning you from church? And we're like, yeah. She's like, oh, we send those out all the time.
What? That's so weird.
I'm sorry. What? And she was so cavalier about, oh, yeah, we send those out all the time. Okay. If the church is sending these out all the time, that means that there are a whole bunch of people who have been told, don't come.
You're not welcome.
You're not welcome. We don't want you. Why?
It's like the opposite of finding and gathering Israel, which is what we're supposed to be doing.
Right.
Why in the world would you ever send out a letter
and split up families and trying to manipulate little, because you've already had the problems here with one kid, and you don't need any more. So like, why would they manipulate this little weird stuff? Because here's the thing, like, it matters that what happened with your daughter, he's right about this. It cascades into, because this happened to me with my daughter when she was 17, and then and we fixed it. Okay. By the time she was 19. But as soon as another manipulative person came into her life, her husband, now we're back to where actually it's worse. It's worse than ever. And so now, as a grandma that I don't get to be, now as a mother that didn't attend a wedding, right? Like all these things. And you know that it affects at every single level. Why would they want that to repeat for your family? When, that's not okay.
Yeah. I feel a lot of anxiety and pressure to, hey, we've got to get this fixed.
Yeah.
And I need to show my kids of, look, no, this is not how the church works. And no, President Nelson and President Oaks and President Eyring, if they knew it, I told them, I'm like, if they knew about this, they would stop it. And the reason I know that they would stop it is because in the Book of Mormon, when Jesus comes and visits the Nephite people, I think it's 3rd Nephi, chapter 18, he says repeatedly, never cast anyone out of church, out of your synagogues.
Yeah, like the excommunication, like you said.
5 times. And
you're not even excommunicated.
I know, right?
He even addresses the excommunication thing. So he's like, basically he's like, if somebody's in, trying to destroy the church, basically, they're not going to be allowed to be members anymore. Nevertheless, do not cast them out, because you never know, they might come back around. And then their soul will be saved. But he is explicit. Jesus Christ is explicit. Never cast anyone out. And a couple years ago, we were having a Stake Relief Society meeting, and Elder Renland came, and he was answering questions that people had written into him. And at one point, he stopped and he goes, I feel impressed to tell you this. And he explained how if you ever get counsel from a leader in the church, and it's outside the circle of what the prophets have taught and what the scriptures have taught, he said, if it's ever outside that circle, that boundary there, their counsel
and direction is wrong. And so this direction or counsel to ban our family from church or any other family
under armed guard, let's remember.
yeah. This counsel that ban people from church.
Oh my gosh.
You don't need to go, should I obey my leaders? You don't need to question that. You go, well, Jesus Christ in the scriptures, he said, no, you should never do that. So if I have a leader telling me to ban these people, ostracize them, tell them they're not allowed, they'll get arrested if they come. You don't
and
need
scare your children to death.
You don't need to do that. And so because that's a problem we've run into is we've had friends approach their bishops in this area and say, hey, will you let the Judds come to church? Will you let me take the sacrament to them? Because they're still members.
Right. Oh yeah, I didn't even think of that.
And,
my gosh.
They're being told, we've been told not to have anything to do with them. We've been told not to talk to them or have anything to do with them.
It's infuriating. That's infuriating to me.
They're like, I've been given orders. I've been given directions. I've got to obey these orders. And the thing is, no, you don't.
They don't abandon murderers in prison. They bring them the sacrament.
I know, right?
Yes!
I know, right? Thank you. Thank you. We are worse than murderers, apparently.
Yeah. And so
that goes back to what I was saying earlier. What has been said about us? What
as you're defending the church? Yeah.
But what thank you. What has been said about us that we are so vile that not only can we not go to church anywhere worldwide, but that the church leaders are being told they can't even talk to us.
Wow.
Something has gone terribly wrong.
Yes, I think so.
Terribly wrong here. And I'm worried that it's a lot worse than we think.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it's been overtaken by something somewhere for sure.
So Phontaine, I'm just curious, do you have any footage of these armed guards coming to your house or when you went to the ward? Do you have any footage?
There is footage of us when we went.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Okay. What happened was we were on our way and my son arrived. We took two cars. My son arrived first and he calls us in a panic and he goes, Dad, Mom, those two guys that came to our house on Friday, they're here.
Oh my gosh.
So we show up and immediately we get our cameras out. We're like, because that's the only weapon we have.
Well, that's terrifying too. Your son is there alone and without you. Yeah.
Get the cameras out and we recorded the whole thing. The weirdest part is that my daughter actually goes around, she comes and she lets us in and that was a big hullabaloo. And there's a whole bunch of details, but we get in there and there's a whole bunch of people videotaping.
Wow.
And there's a whole bunch of, there's like 12 people who had all organized this thing. And they're all, the weirdest thing is they're all mute. None of them say anything. Except one person who is like designated as the spokesperson.
I have no idea who he was.
And then the member of the stake presidency who has the letter and he reads it to us. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing?
Why are they not fellowshipping you back in, or at least setting you down and saying, this is what you did wrong, right? This is your problem. Here's your defection, whatever it is, right? It doesn't matter. No, you don't get that. You don't get a hearing. You don't get fair treatment. You don't get to be refellowshipped. They just don't care that you and your large family are all members. They're supposed to protect and keep their members.
Well, and I think in my humble opinion, this ban is 100% punitive in nature. Alan Smith want anybody to know what he's been doing. And so he's like, how do I shut them up?
And how big is he at the end of this tunnel? Because that's some pretty big control arms. Like,
and I'm worried that more information is going to come out because there's I tell my wife and my kids that weirdness doesn't happen in a vacuum. There's something else going on, and we just
you're being kept from you're being interrupted for some bigger picture that isn't. Yeah.
I think that they've been doing this to a lot of people for a long time, and we're the first ones to stand up and go, no, this isn't right. This is not on my watch. And I think they freaked out. They're scared, and they're like, okay, what do? We just have to ban them, and we have to tell everybody something so horrific that no one will reach out to them either.
Wow.
I don't know what that is. We've heard rumors that were violent.
That were violent is what.
Okay.
that were violent. That the reason we got banned is because we walked in, we disrupted a church meeting, and security had to be called. And that's not
But
true.
security was already there.
Yeah,
Security was already there. We had gotten the letter a few days
2 days
earlier,
prior.
and all the people there had the letter. And so, but other bishops have been told that, and even other lawyers.
Well, no,
that
to Heidi's conspiracy theory, there's something going on. Like,
there's something going on.
definitely something. They're trying to cover something.
Yeah, it's almost like we
you want a conspiracy theory? There it is.
It's
Something's
almost like
going on.
Yeah.
The reaction is so bizarre. It wasn't. They didn't just ban us from, like you said, like they didn't just ban us from one church or do a restraining order against
the world
worldwide. And not only can we not contact them, they can't contact us. Something is very, very weird here.
So our lawyer, the lawyer we had called about this ban, he ended up watching all of Crazy Train. He watched all.
Yeah, I would. Yeah.
And he contacted us, and we didn't ask him to do that. He just did it for fun. And anyway, the next time he called us, he said, I watched Crazy Train. It doesn't make sense why they had such an extreme reaction and banned you from church. That doesn't even make sense. It wasn't. He's not. The lawyer wasn't a member of the church. He's like, it's not antagonistic against your church. It's supportive of your church.
Right.
Right. And it is supportive of our church, but yet you got completely banned from church and almost arrested. This doesn't make sense. And so, so we must have somewhere in episode 23 and 24. They keep trying to take down 23. There's something in 23.
Okay, so I wanted to ask about that because I noticed that episode was polled and it says it just was released a few weeks ago, and I was wondering about that. So you're saying that are they flagging episode 23?
They keep trying to
YouTube to take it down. So something in that episode 23 and I think also 24, we hit a nerve somewhere.
Okay.
23 is the one all about Alan Smith calling CPS on our family. That's that one.
Anyway, so
we're not sure.
We're not sure what's going on, but the reaction that we got, this ban.
You need to get that on other channels.
We do.
Okay.
Yeah, backups of our backups.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
So that doesn't make sense, but the fact that they're lying to the other bishops and stake presidents about why we got the letter, why would they do that? Why wouldn't they just say, hey, they released this series Crazy Train.
Right.
We don't like it.
Ignore it. They're crazy. Like whatever.
So we banned them to kind of give them a kick in the pants of, hey, you got to take that down off.
Or
why didn't they tell that to the other bishops and stake presidents? Why did they make up a lie and
put it in your file?
Curious. So did you get a notification from YouTube why episode 23 was flagged? What was the reasoning behind it? So it was flagged, but then you were able to repost it?
Yeah, because apparently it wasn't a legitimate.
Because it didn't violate the real rules.
Policy, so we just it went back up. But the fact that they're trying to get these taken down speaks volumes.
Mm-hmm. I think
there's something out there they don't want anybody to know.
Yeah, this is
interesting. Very interesting.
Again, but I want to go back to we've had people keep saying, well, you're leaving stuff out of the story. We're not. Like, seriously, if I were to leave stuff out of the story,
you're going to put the embarrassing stuff in there. I don't think.
If I were to try to paint myself in a perfect light, I probably wouldn't have done the whole jail story. I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah, I might have skipped that.
About my experience, the time I got arrested,
or the time I got poor, or like had to go to the bishop.
You know what I'm the child abuse index. Yeah, that's a real conversation starter there. Like, I'm not hiding anything. This is just what has happened.
I never thought I would advocate for people to get back in the Mormon church, but in your case, I will make an exception because I can see that you truly believe in it, and it's important to you. I'm no black pillar. And I don't believe in hurting people like that. Like, I don't like to, mess with people's, even my family that's like in still. I don't go to them and be like, guess what? Like, no, leave them happy where they're at. Like, you guys seem to very much want to be there. It's bizarro world. This is bizarro world that they don't want you home in your church, right? Like,
I appreciate like what you're saying, where you're like, I'm not a member of the church anymore, because we were explaining to Steve, there's no happy place for our family. Like, we've kind of been ostracized by members of the church of, hey, you're bad people, you're giving the church a bad name, or whatever. But then the ex-Mormons, apparently somebody like had posted a crazy train on ex-Mormon
on Reddit.
On Reddit.
Yeah.
The ex-Mormon community watched it and they're furious. They're like, because they finish it and they're like, oh, they still believe.
Yes.
Yeah. They want their happy ending. They want
they want a particular ending, and that's why it's been so difficult for you to get on other podcasts, because you can't go on faithful programs because they're not going to like the stuff you're saying about the church, and you can't go on ex-Mormon programs because you don't have the right ending.
I will have you on my program. I have never felt so like behooved to like help somebody go back to the Mormon church, because I'm like, this can't really be real. Like, this is not okay. We cannot have the Danites coming back. Listen, people, that's not okay. Yeah. And these are nice people. Like, their kids were there and these people are at church with guns. This is what we're talking about. That's not safe. That's unsafe. What if somebody accidentally got antsy and like, popped off and hurt one of your kids,
No, if you watch the video, there's actually a lady physically shoving my wife.
No way. No, not okay.
Folks, let's wrap everything up here. So there will be links in the description to everything that we talked about today. This was an unusual conversation. It's an unusual story. It is a crazy train. Heidi, I want to thank you so much for being the co-host. It was great to have Jan on today as well. And Phontaine and Hannah, when I sat down to the Zoom call with you a few weeks ago, I walked away from the same thing. Like, these people are sincere, they love their church, and they want to stay. And I think it's really important that this message get out there. I just heard from a person in my local ward just was texting me while I was interviewing you, and they've watched the first 3 episodes and they've been blown away by it. So I just want to let you know that, I'm getting the word out, and I really do appreciate you guys coming on the program. And remember, the most important thing is this: all the voices of the restoration will be heard here on Mormon Book Reviews.